It's time for the Volquest podcast, where we dissect the biggest news items of the week.
Good Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com podcast presented by our friends at Smoky Mountain Organics, East Tennessee's most trusted health and wellness store, focusing on natural products and organic remedies for a variety of ailments. That is Smoky Mountain Organics. 4 locations to serve you in East Tennessee, 3 in Sevier County, the location in Knoxville on Kingston Pike, just across from Trader Joe's. And of course, you can shop online at SmokyMountainOrganics.com. With Rob Lewis and Austin Price, I'm Brent Hubbs. Glad to have you along with us on this Tuesday installment of the Volquest.com podcast. Let's start with some basketball, where I guess, Rob, the best way to say this week is opportunity week for the Tennessee basketball team. Is that how you described this week? I mean, last week was better take care of business, even though Mississippi State was on the road. You sort of had to get those. This week is much more of a different challenge, but an opportunity for this basketball team, right?
Huge opportunity, and not even just this week. I mean, the close of the season. I mean, every coach in America that is trying to build a March resume would like to host 2 top 5 teams at home. In the last 2 weeks of the season, like Tennessee has a chance to do with Kentucky and Auburn. I like Tennessee's chances against Kentucky on Tuesday just because of the track record that Rick has in this building against them. And, I haven't seen anything definitive, but it sounds like Ty Washington is not going to play after re-injuring an ankle on Saturday. I think Cal said he thought he'd be out for a week to 10 days. That certainly, I think, changes the dynamics in favor of Tennessee. And that road trip to Arkansas, I mean, if Tennessee wins that one, I'll be really surprised, because Arkansas is playing well right now. They've won 9 out of 10. They just about got Alabama on the road on Saturday. And if you watched the Auburn game last week, that place was an absolute snake pit.
And Rob, if Tennessee were to beat Kentucky like you foresee, then Tennessee rolls in there with all kinds of momentum, and Arkansas has a real chance at that point to kind of pull back close to, with them and Kentucky as they try to get one of those top 4 seeds to get the double bye.
Yeah, I think those 4 teams, Tennessee, or start with Auburn, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Arkansas, I think they pretty much separated themselves as the 4 best in this league. I mean, Alabama is certainly capable, but they're also just all over the board. I mean, with some losses to Georgia, to Missouri, and at the same time go on the road and beat Gonzaga. So I mean, Alabama is certainly formidable and capable of beating anybody in this league, but they've just been too inconsistent to be considered one of those top 4.
Who's not been inconsistent the last 6 games or so now is Tennessee. 5 games, whatever it is, Rob. Is this simply that they found something in that rally at Texas that it clicked? I mean, is that oversimplification of why this team has suddenly, I don't want to say become an offensive juggernaut? They did not shoot the ball great against Vanderbilt, but it was really those last 7 minutes in Austin, Texas, that big of a deal for this offense?
Well, I mean, that's what the kids say. I mean, I kind of have to take them at their word. I mean, anybody that's asked about it, I mean, they rattle that off. And, I personally think there's more to it than that. But I think that, I do think that gave them a blueprint, and they certainly believe that. I know Josiah, believes that. And, but I think if you talk to Rick, he thinks it's a kind of a sum of a lot of little things, which ball movement, which that passes the eye test. That's not hard to see. If you watch Tennessee the past few games, they are whipping the ball around. Passes are crisp. They're quick. The ball's not sticking in places. I think they're moving the defense, and I think guys are moving a lot better without the basketball. I think Santiago's been doing that all year. I think Josiah has gotten a lot better with that. I think Kennedy is understanding more and more, how he needs to play. He didn't have a great game against Vanderbilt, but then, shows up late and kind of seals the deal with 3 straight buckets in the last 4 minutes. So, the numbers don't lie. I mean, they scored 70-plus points 2 times in their first 8 conference games, never more than 80. And the last 4 games, they've been over 70, pretty easily. 91 game, 81 another. So they pretty clearly have figured something out.
Why do you think the 6th man is seemingly, particularly a guard, is seemingly been so important for Rick Barnes? I mean, you go back and look at Lamonte Turner, when he accepted the role as a sixth man and what it meant for that Tennessee team. And you look at what Zakai Ziegler is doing, and what I would consider a sixth man role, obviously not a starting role. He's on the floor at the end of the game. Why do you think that role seems to be so important for Rick Barnes' program?
I don't really think it's the role. I think it's the players. I think it's the individuals. I think Lamonte, and he's not, him and Zakai are different, but they're both hardcore kids. Just big time competitors, big, really mentally tough. And I think they both embrace that role. I think Zakai, I was a big fan of Lamonte, had a ton of respect for him, but to be a freshman and doing what Zakai is doing, I think he is making more of an impact than even Lamonte did. Because he really changes things, and on both ends of the floor, not just knocking in a couple of threes. He is an absolute menace defensively. I bet guys hate playing against that kid.
In any sport that you've covered, and Rob, you've covered Tennessee for a long time. Austin, you have as well. Zakai Ziegler is the best story since what? Who? Given the history that we know now, right? We had the podcast with him on Monday. Everybody's aware of his story. Late ad, you find somebody late, overcoming a lot of odds. Best story you've covered since who?
Grant Williams is a pretty good one. He chose Tennessee over Yale. He grew up in the heart of ACC country in Charlotte and didn't have a single ACC offer. And ends up being a two-time conference player of the year and a first-round draft pick. So I'd go back to that. What's that? 6 years?
From a basketball standpoint, like two guys that arrived at January that you didn't expect to have an impact. And those teams didn't go very far, but Jarnell Stokes had an impact on that team arriving in January from Memphis. And then Vescovi did the same thing a couple of years ago, just when Tennessee needed something. That team ended up, that season got cut short by COVID. So it's not the same, but just the fact that, when you're sitting there, when the calendar rolled to July, you never thought anything about this kid. And yet here we are, half a year later, and he is, just as important to Tennessee's success as Kennedy Chandler or Vescovi or anybody else. and kind of has that, that kind of fan favorite feel to him. But, he and, you guys are comparing him to Lamonte. Both of those guys can score and brought a certain level of swagger to the floor. I think that's the thing is, you have to be a scorer or you have to have some swagger. Like, Jamal Crawford, when he was that sixth man in the NBA for all those years, he could score the basketball. Lamonte and Zakai have a certain swagger to me when they enter the game. There's a certain self-belief with both those kids that not every kid has. So I think to play in that role, you've got to play a certain way. I don't think just anybody can do that six-man role and have success.
No, you have to certainly accept it, and you have to certainly, buy into it. And obviously, Zakai Ziegler has done that. If you're talking across all sports, his story it's a little bit of an Inky Johnson type story from the standpoint he's undersized. The standpoint of his background, growing up is not the easiest background, and immediate commands attention from his teammates. Immediately has gotten their respect out of the gates, and I think it's a great story, and I think what he's done is unbelievable. Rob, it's been a long time since somebody shot over 50% from the 3-point line for 3 straight weeks, and that's essentially what Zakai has done for the last 6 games. I think he's 56% or something like that from the 3-point arc. Yet it never feels like he takes a bunch of bad shots.
I don't think he takes hardly any bad shots. Very, very rarely. He doesn't force anything. You've seen, and I think he's a perfect example of being the beneficiary of the way Tennessee is moving the basketball, because I think so many of his come, after the ball has been on both sides of the floor, the defensive move, maybe somebody has driven in, maybe it's off an offensive rebound, but he doesn't take very many contested or forced shots at all.
Does anybody on this team, Rob, take bad shots? Because I think a year ago you would have said Victor Bailey because he just would volume shoot. But you look at, Kennedy Chandler doesn't probably shoot enough for the quality shooter that he is. Zakai, you just mentioned. Vescovy, I don't think he takes bad shots. And he needs to, shoot as much as he can. And with especially with the way Josiah has played lately, not being so dependent on the three and driving. I mean, are they at a point where now, like, you feel like they are a team that they're all taking quality shots? There's not anybody volume shooting.
Yeah, I think for the most part, I think that's really accurate. And ironically, I would probably say Josiah probably took a few bad ones on Saturday, but they're the ones that we've been begging for him to take, where he did drive it into the paint. And I thought he took a couple, mid range after he put the ball on the floor where he did kind of force it. But I wouldn't quibble with that, because again, everybody has been begging him to put it on the floor, get into the paint, and take, be aggressive like that. But no, I think that's one of this team's strengths is shot selection. But also, and I'm not the only person that said this. I know Rick said it. Sometimes I think, and they've been better about it these last 4 games. But sometimes I think when they get in those ruts, I think they're hunting for perfect shots instead of taking pretty good shots early in the shot clock, and they end up, putting their backs against the wall and getting in a bad spot late in the clock.
Rob, has it taken this team longer to get a gel or get a chemistry and a rhythm on offense because the bench has been deeper all year long compared to what Rick normally plays?
I mean, I don't know that for sure, but I think so. I mean, don't you, Hubbard? I mean, he played 11 guys in the first half on Saturday, which I still think is too much. I mean, he wants to reward Victor Bailey, and I respect Rick for that, because Bailey is such a hard worker, such a good teammate. But I mean, I don't know that he's really earning minutes right now. And I mean, back in November, I would have thought Justin Powell was destined to play a big, big role on this team, but he just hasn't. I mean, Rick's going to continue to play him. I mean, that much is apparent. But he's essentially just stopped looking for a shot, to me. And Frank, the 2 young kids, Hatfield and Adu, I would have played them more. I don't understand why Rick only played Jonas 4 minutes on Saturday. I thought he was pretty productive in the first half, and then didn't get back in the game. And Huntley Hatfield is just, I mean, he's just like a baby giraffe on ice right now. I mean, you can tell. I mean, you can see the pieces, but he's just not put it together yet. But I believe that if Tennessee's going to do anything in March, if they're going to make it to the second weekend, those guys are going to have to do something.
And those guys will be challenged Tuesday night against Kentucky.
Oh,
big time challenge here. John Fulkerson has played better, in spurts the last couple of ball games. But Rob, I mean, in the post, this one's going to be challenging for Tennessee.
I mean, you could see Oscar Sheway coming in here having, 29 and 20. That wouldn't surprise me if he does that. And I've talked about it, written about it. Tennessee's undefeated in SEC play when they out-rebound the competition, and they've only won 1 game when they lost the battle of the boards, and that was at Mississippi State, when they shot 61% from the field in the second half, which covers up a lot of mistakes.
And they may have to shoot that way. They may have to do to Kentucky what Kentucky did to them as far as shooting Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, it's oversimplified, but I mean, Tennessee can't get beat up on the boards. They can't. Vanderbilt's not the most physical or biggest team in the league, but Tennessee crushed them on the glass on Saturday. Tennessee had 17 second chance points, and I don't know that they're going to be capable of getting 17 against Kentucky, but they can't let Kentucky get 15, 16, 17 second chance points on them.
How much better, for all the talk of Tennessee's offense and its improvement there, do you feel like Tennessee's a better defensive team playing Kentucky this next time than they were? I mean, their defense was good when they went up there. Kentucky shot it well, but Tennessee gave up a lot of drives to the basket. How much better is Tennessee defensively from that game?
I think they miss Olivier in this game. The young kids, I don't think they're ready for the level of physicality that, maybe they prove me wrong. I mean, maybe Huntley Hatfield and Edu, go in there and mix it up and hold their own. But I think you're really going to miss Olivier in this matchup.
Well,
because he knows how tough it is, and he knows exactly how you're going to have to bring it in a game like this. And I don't think the 2 youngsters do.
Yeah, foul trouble will be key, particularly in the backcourt. Tennessee's got to be smart. Vescovy cannot get in foul trouble like he was the other night. That 4th foul at midcourt was just you can't make that play there and put yourself in that situation to get that call. So that's going to be key. We know Thompson Bowling Arena is going to be rocking with a sellout crowd as Kentucky comes to town. We'll see if Tennessee's good play on the offensive end can continue against a good Kentucky team that might be shorthanded. We'll see exactly what Kentucky's roster looks like coming up later tonight. We'll have full coverage of Tennessee and Kentucky, obviously throughout today and tonight with the Wildcats in town. Let's flip it right quick, Austin, to a couple of football things. Josh Heupel, his staff back in the office. This is all about getting ready for spring practice. This is all about a self-scout. It's all about figuring out what you need to do better. I mean, that's really the investment. There's certainly recruiting stuff going on, but a lot of this investment right now is all about self-scouting, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're working on your plan for spring. You're dabbling and looking ahead to fall, and you're honestly taking a look back at last year and where they can be better, whether it's operationally, whether it's recruiting visits, whether it's game day planning, whether it's how they handled game day, whether just everything. I mean, the whole month of February, because it's dead, allows you to get a little time off. Because these college coaches work insane hours, 7 to 9, and all that nonsense. But two, it allows them to kind of do a deep dive on themselves and kind of figure out what worked, what didn't work, how can we be better in a number of different areas, from game day to throughout the week.
Rob, biggest question that needs to be answered in spring. We'll talk about this a lot as spring practice gets ready to get started. But if you're Josh Heupel and you've done your self-scout from last year and you're heading into spring practice, what's your top question or your top 2 questions? Maybe you don't get a full answer from them in spring, but you got to have some direction coming out of spring practice with that.
I think receiver depth chart and the 2 deep on the offensive line is probably for me.
Austin?
I think it's continuing to find answers in the secondary. Offensively, I'm with Rob. I think it's receiver. I think you've got to see some guys step up, whether that's guys taking a step off of last year, whether that's some of these true freshmen showing you that they belong enough to warrant a deep, hard look, early in August. I think the offensive line is an interesting dynamic. We had Darnell Wright out on the locker room Sunday, and he mentioned to me that, he'd like to actually move back to right tackle. Feels like he can be better at right tackle than he is at left. And he had a really good year at left tackle. So, which begs the question, if Tennessee goes and they were to get a Tyler Steen or whoever, does that person become the left tackle and Darnell moves to the right tackle spot? Because it sounds like Darnell is very comfortable with that move if that's the case.
That's an interesting decision from Darnell, an interesting discussion from Darnell. Are we in a world of college football where the skill guy is the bigger question mark than the offensive lineman? Because let's face it, I mean, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, Rob, if somebody was said you're looking for your second or third receiver or you're looking for a starting tackle, the biggest question, the biggest priority is the starting tackle. And I mention this because the Cincinnati Bengals draft Jamar Chase and get to the Super Bowl with a bad offensive line. Are we in the world of football where it is truly more about finding those skill guys than it is finding a great offensive lineman?
Yeah, I mean, I think I really haven't thought about it, Albert, but I think you're probably right. I mean, if you think about the impact and that those, there aren't many Jamar Chases out there. Don't get me wrong, but the impact that those guys have. I mean, look at what Cedric Tillman did last year in this offense. I mean, was he, other than the quarterback spot, was he not the most impactful guy on the team or on the offense, at least? I mean, there's probably some degradations in there. I mean, you can't just be terrible on the offensive line, but I mean, I think if you are just okay there, then it's more important to find a skill guy that can be explosive and special.
So, Austin, you can mask the offensive line easier than you can mask a lack of a skill guy?
I agree. I really believe that. Because if you have a mobile quarterback, you don't got to protect forever. but if you can't get open, if you don't have guys that can get open, no matter how good your offensive line is,
And you know what? Maybe it's always been that way, right? A great running back can mask a suspect offensive line.
A great quarterback masks everything.
Well, it's the most important position.
Yeah.
it's you don't win at any level without good quarterback play. Nobody's. I mean, the Bengals advanced out of the second round of the playoffs to go play the Chiefs because the Titans got poor quarterback play. That's the reason. That's the reason the Bengals advanced, is because the quarterback play for the Titans wasn't good enough to advance. So
Yeah, I mean, like look
quarterback
at
play has
Georgia.
to
Everybody
happen.
talks about Georgia's defense, but like Stetson Bennett was really good. I mean, is he as talented a quarterback as there in college football? No. But like when you don't make mistakes, you get the ball out on time and you're smart and you throw it well enough, you know, that's good enough, you know, and there's enough of a help along the offensive line at Georgia and enough of a help at the running game at Georgia to where you don't have to be, you know, a 10 out of 10 at quarterback, you know, and Stetson Bennett didn't have to be 10 out of 10 at quarterback.
No, and again, when he had to make a play, he made a play, and that's what the quarterback position is certainly all about. So Tennessee self-scouting, Tennessee working out in their off-season program. We'll continue to have notes on that in the war room. We'll continue to give you tidbits about those guys along the way, as we've done. On the recruiting front, Austin, it's all about continuing to look at the transfer portal. That Tennessee has been out offering a few kids as well, as their board seems to grow, in not surprising, you know, at this time of year. But it's just maintaining kind of your relationships and where you are till you can get back out on the road, or they can get to your campus in March, right?
Correct. I mean, that first weekend in March is going to be big. You know, Tennessee's hoping to get Tyler Steen here then from a transfer portal standpoint. Tennessee would love to get that kid. You know, there's no two ends and ifs and buts about it. I mean, it's a position where Tennessee could use some help. You know, Tennessee's going to, you know, have several really good quality players here that first weekend in March for their junior day. But this is a situation where Tennessee's going to, you know, take a long, hard look at several guys that are in the portal, especially ones that go in after spring or during spring. You know, and we'll see where Tennessee goes from there. But, you know, Tennessee knows they can officially be active in the portal, or more active than just a couple of spots coming up here, you know, in the next couple of months, and I expect them to be.
Yeah, there's no doubt that that's what they have to do. And again, continue to evaluate, continue to look at. Looks like it's going to be a sled load of running backs in town for Junior Day. If all those guys come in, it seems like Jerry Mack's got his whole board coming in for Junior Day at the running back position. We'll continue to give you some names throughout the war room as well, but a handful of names, several names that we posted in the war room last week. Some big time talent scheduled to be in. We'll see what happens if all those guys get here. We know some of that can't happen. Rob, Brian Harsin is still the coach at Auburn. How surprised are you? And if you're Auburn, how do you even sell that to anybody at this point?
I mean, I don't know. It's one of the craziest things. I mean, we've seen a lot of crazy stuff here. It's probably not crazier than the brief but flamboyant Mike Price era in Tuscaloosa. but it's been wild, man, to see all that smoke, you know, for the last 2 weeks, and then that he's apparently going to survive it. And I don't know how you move past Auburn. I mean, I had to think that there has to be some fresh relationships down there on the plains. It would be a very tough work environment.
And you've had mass exodus, Rob. Your quarterback isn't as strong as what you were a year ago.
You don't have an OC.
You don't have. I mean, yeah. I mean, like, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, I mean, unless they felt like that he was going to be able to sue them for, you know, some type of wrongful termination. Like, it makes no sense to keep him, because, I mean, how are you going to have any kind of legs to stand on in recruiting? Like, every school is going to hammer you the way they did Tennessee about the investigation last year with, you know, hey, they brought him back, but I mean, they did an investigation on your head football coach in February. He ain't going to be back past next year, guys. There's no point to even look at Auburn. I mean, that's going to be the common pitch from every school recruiting against the Tigers. And it should be, just like it was used against Tennessee last year. So, I mean, you're not doing your job if you're a coach, and you're not using that against Auburn in the current realm of recruiting.
You know, Rob, I felt like the biggest mistake, look, you know, and I didn't follow it, you know, every 5 minutes the way it was going, but the fact that the university president came out and was so clear cut, transparent, if you will, on what they were doing. You know, we're looking into this. We'll have a resolution soon. I mean, he kind of backed Auburn into a corner and having to make a decision. You know, I mean, you couldn't let it linger on for weeks upon weeks that he was under investigation. Auburn was almost too forthright from the president's office and kind of what they were doing, backing themselves into a corner that they had to make a choice. He's either staying or going. I mean, you couldn't let it ride out any longer because you were almost too open about stuff.
Yeah, I mean, when Bruce Pearl's the least controversial coach of a major sport on your campus, you got issues.
Well, and we'll see what happens with Auburn. I mean, who knows what spring practice is going to look like down there? Who's going to come see them from a recruiting standpoint? And that they've got a lot of challenges ahead of them. That was certainly a wild story that did not end the way most people covering that team and covering that program thought it was going to end. The Tennessee,
I can't believe it didn't happen here.
What's that? We didn't have
I can't believe. Yeah, if it was gonna, if something like that was gonna happen, I can't believe it didn't happen in Knoxville, and you had to deal with it.
No, I mean, I'll say this: Tennessee's had their moments, and they've had their storylines that have gotten them national attention. But you think about this deal with Auburn, and then the fact that Bobby Petrino years ago interviewed in the middle of the night, with that deal was just. And all that mess that was going on there was crazy. Auburn always makes it interesting. That is for sure. Tennessee baseball team gets first pitch underway on Friday. We'll have a sit down with Tony Vitello coming up on Wednesday. Continue to get you ready for Tennessee baseball coming up on Friday afternoon as the Volunteers get their season started. The outdoor porches are done. The bleachers along the left field line are done. That's a nice little environment that they're continuing to create. It's in slow increments, Austin. It's not just a, demolition and restart, but they've done some things and continue to do some things to make that a more imposing venue for opponents who are coming to town. Should be a fun spring. I know Tony Vitello is looking forward to it, isn't he?
Yeah, and when we sit down with Tony for the one-on-one video interview that we'll run tomorrow, he talked about how their program kind of mirrors their stadium enhancements. It's not been boom. It's kind of been this gradual build, and you can start to see the changes in the program. You can see the changes in the stadium, and he really likes this pitching staff. He's got some young guys he really likes, and we'll be interested to see if they can rise to the challenge with Blade Tidwell out. If they can rise to the challenge. As he points out in the interview, when you get Tidwell back, that's like getting a free agent signing midseason, or you're getting somebody at the trade deadline. I mean, it's a big deal.
Yep. So how this young pitching staff, how some of these young players handle things at the start of the season, and they can build this team together. We start that watch on Friday as this baseball team gets underway. Ben McKee will have plenty of baseball coverage. Again, we've got our sit down with Tony Vitello coming up tomorrow. But tonight it's about Tennessee and the Wildcats as Kentucky comes to town. And we've got full coverage of Tennessee basketball coming up throughout the rest of the day and coverage of the game tonight. That's going to do it for this Tuesday edition of the Volquest.com podcast presented by our good friends at Smoky Mountain Organics. For Rob Lewis and Austin Price, I'm Brent Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, everybody.
You've been listening to the Volquest podcast every week here on Volquest.